The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, circling a dead star that had collapsed into something dense and strange. Inside the massive structure, representatives from 847 different species gathered for their weekly session. The chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose toward the domed ceiling. Translators hummed softly, turning thousands of different languages into sounds each species could understand. Ambassador Taekwon sat in the human section, his dark suit simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other delegates. He had served Earth in this chamber for 20 years. His hair had gone gray during that time, and deep lines had formed around his eyes. Today, those eyes held a sadness that his aide, Dr. Hannah Bake, had never seen before. "Are you certain about this?" Hannah whispered, leaning close so the translator wouldn't pick up her words. Tae nodded once, slowly. "We gave them every chance. Every warning. They chose not to listen." 1. The session began as it always did, with minor disputes and trade discussions. The Velthans argued with the Koraks about shipping lanes. The Quellan administrator, Director Velmuth, mediated with his usual patience. He had worked alongside humans for 30 years and considered Tae a close friend. When the minor business concluded, Velmuth opened the floor for new issues. Tae stood. The chamber grew quiet. Humans didn't speak often in council sessions. But when they did, people listened. "Director Velmuth, honored delegates," Tae began, his voice steady and clear. "I bring a simple statement from Earth and all human colonies." Velmuth gestured for him to continue, his 4 eyes blinking in curiosity. Tae pulled out a small device and read from it, though Hannah knew he had memorized the words. "Humanity respectfully withdraws from the Galactic Council. Our treaty obligations will be honored until their natural expiration. We wish you all well." The silence that followed was absolute. 847 species, thousands of delegates, and not one made a sound. Then chaos erupted. Delegates jumped to their feet, their translators overlapping in a cacophony of demands and questions. Velmuth called for order, his voice rising above the noise, but few listened. The Threx war coordinator, a massive creature covered in armored plates, roared something that the translators rendered as treason. Tae simply collected his device and walked toward the exit. Hannah followed, her heart pounding. Behind them, the shouting grew louder. Velmuth caught up with them in the corridor. "Tae, my friend. What is this? What's happened?" Tae stopped and turned. For a moment, his formal mask cracked, and Velmuth saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry, old friend. This isn't about you personally, but humanity cannot continue on this path." "What path? Explain this to me." "We've been your maintenance workers," Hannah said quietly. "Your mediators. Your problem solvers. Your go-betweens. And you've forgotten how to do these things yourselves." Velmuth's 4 eyes widened. "That's not we value your contributions, but do you even remember the last time you settled a dispute without calling us in?" Tae asked. "The Threx and the Silicates have been in the same room for 2 hours today, and they haven't tried to kill each other. Do you know why?" Velmuth didn't answer. "Because they know we're here to keep them apart, because they don't have to act like adults when humanity will do it for them." "You can't just leave," Velmuth said, and now there was desperation in his voice. "There are procedures, transition periods. We've been warning the Council for 10 years, Hannah said. "We've submitted reports. We've given presentations. We've begged you to develop your own conflict resolution systems, your own trade networks that don't depend on us. We thought we had time," Velmuth whispered. "You did," Tae said. "You wasted it." Within hours, every human in Council space received the same message. Diplomats packed their offices, scientists abandoned their laboratories, merchants closed their shops. Human families who had lived on alien worlds for generations gathered their belongings. It was orderly and calm. There was no panic, no drama. Humans simply said goodbye to their alien friends and neighbors, climbed aboard their ships, and departed. On the orbital station above Velthara Prime, a human doctor named Yoon Park treated his last patient. The Velthan child had a simple infection, easily cured with standard medicine. As he prepared the injection, the child's mother watched him with wide, frightened eyes. "The rumors are true?" she asked. "Yes," Yoon said gently, administering the medicine. "We are. But why? Did we do something wrong?" Yoon smiled sadly. "You did everything we asked. That was the problem." He handed her a data chip. "These are basic medical procedures. Things you should already know how to do. Things you should already know how to do. Learn them. Teach them to others. Will you come back?" "I don't know," Yoon said honestly. "That depends on you, all of you." By the second day, the human quarter of the council station was empty. Every shop, every apartment, every office stood vacant. The only things left behind were instruction manuals, carefully organized and translated into hundreds of languages. In the main council chamber, Velmith stood alone, looking at the empty human section. 218 seats that would never be filled again. He held a datapad that contained the last official message from Earth. It was simple. "We're fine. We simply choose isolation." He had tried to contact Tay directly, dozens of times. Each attempt received the same automated response. Other council members weren't handling it as well. The Korax demanded military action. The Velthans begged for negotiations. The Threks saw opportunity, their eyes already turning toward the power vacuum humanity had left behind. An emergency session was called. For 6 hours, delegates argued about what to do. Send ambassadors to Earth? Impose sanctions? Declare humanity in violation of some ancient law? But they all knew the truth, even if few would say it aloud. Humanity had done nothing wrong. Every treaty had been honored. Every obligation had been met. They had simply left. "We need them," said a small delegate from one of the younger species. "Who will stop the Threks and the Silicates from fighting?" "We will," Velmith said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Who will maintain the trade routes through the barrier nebula?" Silence. "Who will help us when the next plague comes? Who will mediate our disputes? Who will?" "We will," Velmith said again, louder this time. "We are hundreds of intelligent species. Surely we can manage what one species was doing." But looking around the chamber, seeing the fear and uncertainty in thousands of eyes, he wasn't sure he believed it. On Earth, Tay stood in his garden, breathing air that hadn't been filtered through recyclers. Hana found him there, watching the sunset. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "I don't know," Tay admitted. "But we couldn't keep carrying them forever. They need to learn to walk on their own." Tay admitted. 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 Tay. "And if they fall?" Tay was quiet for a long moment. "Then they'll learn to get back up. That's how growing works." Above them, in orbit, the Earth Defense Network hummed with power. Automated systems watched the borders of human space. Not a single council ship had approached yet, but when they did, they would find something unexpected. Humanity had been holding back for a very long time. 3 cycles had passed since humanity closed its borders. In the Galactic Council, 3 cycles felt like a lifetime. Yoon Park sat in his apartment on Earth, watching intercepted transmissions from council space. He had once been humanity's chief trade negotiator, the man who kept goods flowing between species that hated each other. Now he watched as those same trade routes collapsed like dominoes. The first route to fail was the Theta Corridor, a shipping lane that connected the industrial Mechron worlds with the agricultural planets of the Harvest Collective. For 20 years, human ships had guaranteed safe passage through the corridor. They dealt with pirates, negotiated toll rates, and kept the peace between the Mechrons and the Harvesters, who despised each other for reasons nobody could quite remember anymore. Without human protection, pirates hit the corridor within days. The Mechrons sent warships to escort their freighters. The harvesters saw this as an invasion and sent their own military vessels. Within a week, the corridor was a war zone. Trade stopped completely. "That's 7 routes down," Yoon muttered, making notes on his datapad. 40 more to go. His wife, Mina, looked over his shoulder. "You sound like you expected this." "I wrote the report," Yoon said quietly. 5 years ago. Showed the council exactly which systems would fail without human oversight. They thanked me politely and filed it away. On the council station, Director Velmuth was learning the same lesson. His office was buried under reports of trade disputes, border conflicts, and economic failures. Each one could be traced back to humanity's absence. The currency crisis came next. Velmuth hadn't even known there was a currency problem until it exploded. For decades, human credits had become the standard for galactic trade. It had happened gradually, naturally. Human currency was stable, backed by real resources, and humans enforced contracts fairly. Species that didn't trust each other would trust human arbitration. Now, with humanity gone, everyone wanted to cash out their human credits. But Earth wasn't accepting currency exchanges anymore. Trillions of credits became worthless overnight. Economies that had built themselves on human trade collapsed. "How did we not see this coming?" Velmuth asked his assistant, a young Quellan named Ravik. "We saw it, Director," Ravik said, pulling up old files. "The humans warned us, multiple times. Here's a report from Ambassador Tay, dated 4 years ago. He specifically mentions overdependence on human economic systems." Velmuth read the report, his heart sinking. It was all there, laid out in clear, simple language. Warnings, recommendations, offers to help the Council develop independent systems. And the Council's response? They'd thanked Tay and done nothing. "We thought we had time," Velmuth said again. The same words he'd spoken to Tay. "Yes, Director. But the economic problems were nothing compared to what came next." The Threx Combine and the Silicate Concordat had hated each other for 300 years. The reasons were complicated, rooted in ancient territorial disputes and cultural differences. For the last 60 years, humans had kept them from killing each other. Carefully arranged meetings, back-channel negotiations, subtle pressure on both sides. Premier Caldrix of the Threx Combine was a warrior who had built his career on speeches about silicate treachery. But he'd never actually fought them because humanity always stepped in first. Now, humanity was gone. The border incident started small. A Threx mining ship crossed into what the Silicates considered their territory. Instead of calling for human mediators, the Silicates destroyed the ship. The Threx retaliated. Within hours, both sides had mobilized their fleets. Velmuth tried everything. He sent diplomats. He offered to mediate himself. He begged both sides to wait, to talk, to remember the peace they'd enjoyed. Caldrix's response was simple. "We don't need humanity to protect us anymore. And we don't need you, either." The fleets met at the border, hundreds of ships on each side, and then the shooting started. In the council chamber, delegates watched in horror as the war began. Within days, 12 other species had been pulled into the conflict. Old alliances activated. Ancient grudges resurfaced. The entire galactic southwest quadrant became a war zone. "Stop them!" someone shouted. "Send peacekeepers." "With what ships?" another delegate replied. "Humans provided 60% of our peacekeeping forces. We have our own militaries, which are busy protecting our own borders because we don't trust each other." Velmuth slammed his hand on the podium. "Enough. We are the Galactic Council. We are supposed to be better than this." "We were better than this," said the Corax ambassador. "When humanity made us better." On Earth, Hannah Bake was working late in her laboratory when the security alert came through. A council ship had approached human borders. She pulled up the monitor and watched. The ship was a diplomatic vessel, unarmed, flying the council's flag. It broadcast a message on repeat. Requesting emergency audience with human leadership. Galactic crisis in progress. Immediate assistance needed. The ship reached the boundary of human space, marked by warning buoys that broadcast in every known language. Human borders closed. Turn back immediately. The council ship didn't turn back. It crossed the boundary. The response was instant and automated. A dozen defense satellites lit up, targeting systems locking onto the ship. The ship's captain must have seen this because the vessel stopped cold, hovering just inside human space. "This is Captain Merrick's of the Council Diplomatic Corps," the message changed. "We need to speak with someone, please. People are dying." Hannah made a decision. She opened a channel. "This is Dr. Hannah Bake. You have 30 seconds to turn around before our automated defenses fire." "Dr. Bake!" The captain sounded desperate. "The Threx and Silicates are at war. 12 species involved. Thousands dead already. We need human mediators. We need peacekeepers. You need to solve your own problems," Hannah said, her voice harder than she felt. "We warned you this would happen. People are dying. Yes, and more will die. That's what happens when children play with weapons." She paused. "We gave you decades to prepare for this. To build your own conflict resolution systems, to learn to talk to each other without us in the middle. You chose not to. These are the consequences. You can't just watch us burn. We can, and we will. Because if we come running every time you hurt yourselves, you'll never learn." Hannah's hand hovered over the disconnect button. "Turn your ship around, Captain. You have 15 seconds before our defenses fire automatically." The ship turned around. Hannah sat in the dark of her lab, listening to the distant hum of the satellites. She felt sick, but she also knew this was necessary. On the council station, Velmuth received word of the failed diplomatic mission. He wasn't surprised. He'd found files left behind by Ambassador Nari Choi, the last human to leave council space. They were encrypted, but his best technicians had finally cracked them. The files were devastating in their honesty. Nari had documented everything. Every time the council had called on humanity to solve a problem, they should have solved themselves. Every warning that went unheeded, every report that was filed and forgotten. One file was labeled, "Why We Left." Velmuth read it 3 times. "We watched you become dependent," Nari had written, like parents watching their children refuse to leave home. "At first, we thought we were helping. Then we realized we were enabling. Every problem we solved for you was a lesson you didn't learn. Every conflict we mediated was a skill you didn't develop. We warned you. We begged you to stand on your own. You didn't listen. So we're making you listen. We're leaving, and we're not coming back until you've learned to walk without us." Velmuth set down the datapad and looked around his office. Reports of war, economic collapse, social unrest, all the things humanity had been quietly preventing while the council took credit for peace and prosperity. "They were right," he said to the empty room. "We did need them, but they needed to leave." The question was whether the council would survive long enough to learn the lesson. 15 cycles after humanity's departure, the galaxy was burning. Jin Seo floated in his observation station, hidden in an asteroid field at the edge of human space. His job was simple: watch the council territories and report what he saw. He'd been doing this job for 8 cycles now, and every day brought worse news. The Threx-Silicate War had spread like fire through dry grass. What started as a border dispute now involved 43 species across 6 sectors. Entire planets had been glassed. Millions were dead. Refugee ships crowded the space lanes, fleeing toward any safe harbor they could find. Jin recorded everything in meticulous detail. He knew these reports went to the Defense Council on Earth, but he never received feedback. He didn't need it. His job was to watch, not to judge. Today he watched a battle near the Kresh Nebula. Threx dreadnoughts traded fire with silicate battle groups. Between them, smaller ships from a dozen allied species darted and weaved, firing missiles and laser batteries. It was chaos. Beautiful and terrible. His instruments detected something else, a plague ship, broadcasting distress signals. Jin pulled up the details and his stomach dropped. The ship was from Velthara Prime, the Velthan homeworld. 3,000 souls aboard. all infected with something the automated message called the Gray Death. They were begging for help, for medicine, for doctors. Jin checked his medical database. Gray Death was a bacterial infection, easily treated with standard antibiotics. Any human medical facility could cure it in days, but humans weren't there anymore. He watched the plague ship drift through space, sending its desperate signals. Other ships gave it a wide berth. Nobody wanted to risk infection. Nobody knew how to help. "This is what we used to do," Jin said aloud to the empty station. "Before we left, human doctors would have been on that ship within hours, but human doctors were home now, working on their own projects, advancing their own research. The galaxy would have to save itself." On the council station, the situation was approaching complete breakdown. Director Velmuth looked like he'd aged 20 years in 15 cycles. His fur had gone gray, and his 4 eyes held a permanent exhaustion. "Another delegation is demanding we force humanity to return," his assistant Ravik reported. "Which one?" "The Korathi League. They've lost 3 colonies to the war. They say humanity has a moral obligation to help." Velmuth laughed bitterly. "A moral obligation. We ignored their moral obligations for decades. And now we demand they honor ours? What should I tell them?" "Tell them the truth. Humanity isn't coming back." The council had tried everything. They'd sent more diplomatic ships to human borders, only to be turned away by automated defenses. They'd tried economic sanctions, which was laughable since human space was completely self-sufficient. They'd even discussed military action. That discussion had ended when War Coordinator Thress pulled up humanity's last military assessment. The document was 10 years old, and even then, human military technology was impressive. Now, after 15 cycles of isolation, who knew what they'd developed? "We could force our way in," Thress had suggested, his armored plating bristling with aggression. "Could we?" Velmuth had asked. The humans maintained a military force that could deploy anywhere in council space within hours. They had ships we'd never seen, weapons platforms we didn't understand, and that was when they were being our friends. The room had gone quiet. Nobody wanted to find out what humanity was capable of when they weren't being friendly. The real problem was that the council was discovering just how much humanity had been doing behind the scenes. It wasn't just mediation and peacekeeping. It was infrastructure. Human-designed satellites maintained communication networks across half the galaxy. Human engineers had built the trade station hubs that everyone relied on. Human programmers had written the software that ran everything from traffic control to banking systems. All of it still worked. For now. But nobody knew how to maintain it. Nobody knew how to fix it when it broke. The humans had left manuals, but the manuals assumed a level of technical knowledge that most species simply didn't have. "We've become helpless," Velmuth said one night, sitting alone in his office. "We had hundreds of intelligent species, and we couldn't tie our own shoes without humanity's help." The plague from Velthara Prime spread. Without human medical networks to coordinate a response, it jumped from system to system. The Velthans begged for help. Their doctors tried to develop treatments, but they'd relied on human pharmaceutical companies for so long that they'd forgotten how to do the research themselves. 50 million Velthans died before a Korak scientist finally synthesized a working antibiotic. The formula was almost identical to one humans had shared freely a decade earlier. Meanwhile, the pirate crisis had reached catastrophic levels. Human patrol networks had kept the space lanes safe. Small, fast ships operated by human crews who knew every trick in the book. Without them, pirates operated with impunity. Raider clans that had been minor nuisances became major threats. They hit cargo ships, passenger vessels, even military transports. The Council tried to respond, but coordinating a multi-species military force without human logistics support was nearly impossible. Languages were a problem. Technology compatibility was a problem. Basic trust was a problem. Species that should have been working together spent more time arguing about command structure than fighting pirates. Jin watched one attempt at a coordinated anti-piracy sweep. 6 species contributed ships. The operation was supposed to clear out a notorious pirate base in the Outer Rim. It was a disaster. The different species couldn't agree on tactics. Their communication systems didn't interface properly. When they finally attacked, they were so uncoordinated that the pirates simply scattered and escaped. Humanity made it look easy. Jin recorded in his log. But it wasn't easy. It was skilled professionals doing complicated work. And nobody noticed because they did it so well. On Earth, Mina Lim supervised the defense network from her command center. She saw every ship that approached human borders. And there were many. Most were refugees, begging to be allowed into human space. Families fleeing the war. Merchants who'd lost everything. Scientists looking for sanctuary. Each ship broadcast desperate pleas. Please, we know you're listening. We have children aboard. We just need somewhere safe. Mina's orders were clear and absolute. No entry. Not for refugees, not for anyone. Human space was closed. It hurt. She joined the defense force to protect people, and now she was turning away civilians who needed help. But she understood why. If we let them in, her commander had explained, we become the solution again. We become the place that saves people, instead of forcing them to save themselves. The cycle continues. The cycle continues. Some of them will die, Mina had said. Yes, and that's terrible. But if we keep saving them, millions more will die over the next century because the Council never learns to protect itself. Still, it hurt. One day, something different happened. A fleet of Council warships approached human borders. 23 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts. They didn't broadcast diplomatic messages. They took up attack formations. This is the Council Military Task Force, their commander announced. We demand that humanity cease its illegal isolation and provide immediate assistance to Council space. You have 1 hour to respond, or we will consider you in violation of galactic law. Mina watched from her command center. Around her, defense systems activated automatically. Weapon platforms powered up. Shield generators came online. Her staff worked calmly and efficiently. Should we warn them? Her second-in-command asked. Mina shook her head. They were warned at the border. They chose to ignore it. The Council fleet waited an hour. When no response came, they advanced. They crossed into human space. Weapons hot. Ready for battle. They made it exactly 12 kilometers before every ship system shut down. Engines, weapons, life support, communications, everything went dark simultaneously. The ships drifted, powerless and silent. Mina opened a channel. Council vessels, this is Earth Defense. Your ship systems have been temporarily disabled by suppression field. You are in no danger. You will be released when you drift back across the border. Panic filled the channel as the ship's crews realized they were completely helpless. Hours passed as momentum carried them backward. The moment they crossed back into Council space, their systems came back online. The fleet retreated immediately. Jin watched the whole thing from his station. He recorded every detail and sent it to Earth with a simple note. They know now. We could have destroyed them without firing a shot. Back on the Council station, Velmuth received the report of the failed military action. He read it in silence, then shared it with the full Council. This is what we're dealing with, he told the assembled delegates. Humanity has technology we don't understand and can't counter. They could have destroyed that fleet. Instead, they simply embarrassed us. Then we negotiate, someone suggested. They don't want to negotiate. They want us to grow up. The chamber fell silent. Outside the windows, refugee ships drifted past, heading toward overcrowded stations that could barely feed the people already there. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson, and the tuition was paid in blood. 32 cycles after humanity's departure, something changed. Director Velmuth was in his office, reviewing casualty reports from the ongoing wars, when every screen in Council space suddenly went dark. Then they all displayed the same image. The Earth, blue and green, rotating slowly against the black of space. A voice spoke. Velmuth recognized it immediately. Ambassador Taekwon, older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes still sharp. People of the Galactic Council, Tae began. This is Ambassador Taekwon, speaking on behalf of humanity. I know you've wanted to hear from us. Today, you will. Across Council space, billions stopped what they were doing and watched. In refugee camps, on warships, in government buildings, everyone stared at screens, showing the human who had walked away from them. 32 cycles ago, we left the Council. We gave no explanation beyond a simple statement. Today, I will explain why. Tae stood in what looked like a garden on Earth. Real sky above him, real grass beneath his feet. Behind him, cities rose in the distance, but not the cities the Council remembered. These were taller, brighter, more advanced. We came to the Council 312 cycles ago with hope and excitement. We discovered we weren't alone in the universe. We were young and eager to learn, to share, to build something together. His expression grew sad. For a time, it was wonderful. We learned so much. We contributed what we could. We made friends. But slowly, we noticed something troubling. You stopped solving your own problems. Velmuth felt his heart sink. He knew what was coming. At first, we were flattered. You asked for our help mediating disputes. We were good at it. So we said yes. You asked us to maintain trade routes. We had the ships. So we agreed. You asked us to patrol for pirates, to provide medical assistance, to arbitrate contracts, to manage currency systems. Tae's voice grew firmer. We said yes to all of it. And you stopped doing these things yourselves. Why would you? Humans would handle it. Humans were good at this work. Humans never said no. On the Council station, delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We became your caretakers, not your partners, not your equals, your servants, though you never called us that. And the worst part? You didn't even realize what was happening. It felt natural to you. Comfortable. Tae pulled out a data pad. 27 years ago, we submitted our first warning report. We documented how dependent you'd become on human services. We recommended you develop your own systems. Do you know what the Council's response was? He waited, as if expecting an answer. The Council thanked us for our concern and suggested we continue providing services while they studied the issue. They studied it for 27 years. Behind Tae, the image changed. A montage of scenes from Council space. Wars. Refugee camps. Plague ships. Collapsed economies. We knew this would happen when we left. We documented it all. Every system that would fail. Every conflict that would erupt. Every crisis that would emerge. We gave you the reports. We begged you to prepare. His voice softened. Some of you listened. Director Velmuth, you tried. You pushed for reform. You argued for independence. But you were ignored too. The Council was comfortable, and comfort is addictive. Velmuth felt tears forming in his eyes. Tae was right. He'd tried for years and gotten nowhere. So we left. Not because we hated you. Not because we stopped caring. We left because we cared too much to watch you atrophy into helplessness. The scene shifted again, showing Earth's cities in detail. Advanced technology, clean energy, thriving culture. In 32 cycles, freed from the burden of maintaining your civilization, we've grown more than we did in the previous 3 centuries. We've made breakthroughs in physics, medicine, engineering. We've explored our own potential. Meanwhile, you've suffered. Millions have died. Economies have collapsed. Your people have known terror and pain and loss. Tae's expression was grave. I won't apologize for that. Those deaths are not on our hands. They're on yours. We warned you. We gave you decades to prepare. You chose comfort over competence. These are the consequences. The broadcast paused. Tae seemed to be looking directly at each viewer. But something else has happened. Some of you have started to learn. Tae, the image changed again, showing recent council footage. Velmuth recognized it immediately. It was the Corax-Mechron trade agreement, negotiated without human mediation. The first successful independent negotiation in 32 cycles. The Corax and Mechrons, who've been enemies for a century, sat down together and worked out their differences. Without human mediators, it took them 6 months. And they nearly killed each other twice. But they did it. More images flashed by. A Velthan scientist holding up a vaccine. A multi-species anti-piracy task force actually working together. A new currency system being tested. You're learning. Slowly. Painfully. But you're learning. And that's exactly what needed to happen. On Earth, Hannah Bake watched the broadcast with her team. They'd been planning this for months. Gathering footage, writing the speech, debating every word. Will it work? Asked one of her researchers. I don't know, Hannah admitted. But it's time they understood. The broadcast continued. Tay's image was replaced by a woman Velmuth didn't recognize. She was younger, with kind eyes. I'm Dr. Hannah Bake, Earth Science Director. I want to show you something. The scene shifted to a massive laboratory complex. Thousands of researchers worked on projects that looked decades beyond anything the Council had. This is the Aurora Research Center, one of 8 facilities we've built since leaving the Council. Here, we're developing technology that will change everything. Faster-than-light communication without relay stations. Medical treatments that can cure diseases you consider death sentences. Energy systems that could power entire sectors. She walked through the facility, cameras following. We developed all of this in 32 cycles. Do you know why we didn't develop it before? She stopped and faced the camera directly. Because we were too busy maintaining your civilization. Every human scientist who could have been working on breakthroughs was instead fixing your problems. Teaching your children. Treating your sick. Her expression was sad but firm. We don't regret helping you, but we couldn't keep sacrificing our potential for your comfort. The broadcast shifted again. This time it showed a recording from 15 cycles earlier. The Council fleet that had tried to force entry into human space. Disabled and drifting. Some of you tried to force us to return, Tay's voice narrated. You sent warships. We could have destroyed you. It would have been easy. But we didn't, because you're not our enemies. You're like children who need to learn to walk. And we're the parents who finally stepped back. The image changed one last time, showing Tay standing in his garden again. I'll close with this. The galaxy you built with our help was beautiful but fragile. It depended entirely on humanity bearing the weight. That's not a partnership. That's not sustainable. You needed to fall so you could learn to stand on your own. He paused, letting the words sink in. Many of you are angry. You think we abandoned you. You're right to be angry. But ask yourselves, did we abandon you? Or did you abandon yourselves? Did we fail you? Or did you fail to prepare for the possibility that we might not always be there? Velmuth realized he was crying openly now. Other delegates in the chamber were too. Some with anger, some with shame, some with understanding. We watch you, Tay said softly. Every day, we monitor what's happening in Council space. We see your struggles. We see your failures. But we also see your successes. Every time you solve a problem without us, every time you overcome a challenge, we celebrate. Because that's what we wanted all along. The question now is, what will you do? Will you keep fighting each other? Blaming us? Waiting for someone to save you? Or will you finally become what you could be? Tay smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young ambassador who'd first arrived at the Council centuries ago. We're not your enemies. We're not your servants. We're your neighbors, waiting to see what you'll become when you finally grow up. When you're ready, when you've learned to stand on your own, we'll be here. Not to save you, not to maintain you, but to work with you as equals. The broadcast ended. Screens across the galaxy went dark, then returned to normal programming. In the Council chamber, nobody spoke for a long time. Then Velmuth stood. His legs felt weak, but his voice was strong. "They're right," he said. "About everything. We became dependent. We stopped growing. We blamed them for leaving. Instead of asking why we needed them so badly, he looked around the chamber. So here's my question for this council. Are we going to keep crying about what we lost? Or are we going to prove we can be what they hoped we'd become?" In the silence that followed, something changed. Not everyone agreed. Not everyone understood. But enough did. Enough to start something new. On Earth, Tay turned off the broadcast equipment and sat down heavily. Hana joined him. "How do you think they took it? Some will understand, some won't. But we've said what needed to be said. And if they don't change?" Tay looked up at the stars. "Then we'll keep watching, keep hoping. Because despite everything, I still believe in them." 100 cycles had passed since humanity closed its borders. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Kai 1 stood at the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle, watching the stars stream past. He was 28 years old. Born 3 years after humanity's departure from the Council. He'd grown up hearing stories about the old days, about the Council and the decision to leave. Now he was about to see it all for himself. "Nervous?" asked his advisor, an older woman named Yuna Zhang. "A little," Kai admitted. Yuna had been part of the original Council delegation before the departure. She'd volunteered to return for this historic meeting. "Don't be. They've changed. We've changed. This is a new beginning." The shuttle approached the meeting point, a neutral space station built specifically for this occasion. It wasn't in Council territory or human space, but somewhere in between, a symbol of the new relationship being forged. As the station came into view, Kai saw it was beautiful. Modern design, incorporating elements from dozens of species. Not the old Council aesthetic, which had been dominated by the founding species. This was something new. The shuttle docked, and Kai stepped into the station's main hall. A delegation waited for him. He recognized Director Velmuth from the historical recordings, though the Quellan was much older now, his fur completely white, moving slowly with the help of a walking device. But the person who stepped forward to greet him wasn't Velmuth. It was a young Quellan woman, maybe Kai's age, with bright, intelligent eyes. "Ambassador 1, she said in perfect Earth standard. "I'm Ambassador Yuna Zhang." "Welcome," Kai blinked. "Yuna Zhang, but my advisor. Different person." "Same name," the Quellan said with a smile. "My parents named me after one of the last human ambassadors to serve in the Council. They said she represented what they hoped the future would be." Kai glanced at his advisor, who smiled. "I'm honored. Please, come," the younger Yuna said. "We have much to discuss." They walked through the station together. Kai noticed immediately how different it was from the old Council recordings he'd studied. Species that had once segregated themselves, now mixed freely. Threx and silicates, former bitter enemies, worked side by side on a construction project. "Surprised?" Velmuth asked, hobbling alongside them. "Very," Kai admitted. "We learned our lessons," the old Quellan said. "Some of us the hard way. Many didn't survive the learning." They entered a conference room. Around the table sat representatives from 30 species. Not the full Council, which had been too large and unwieldy. This was the new assembly, as they called it, smaller, more focused, with rotating representation to prevent any species from becoming too dominant. "Shall we begin?" Ambassador Yuna asked, taking her seat. The next hours were spent in careful negotiation. Not the kind of negotiation where humans solved problems for everyone else. This was different. Both sides came prepared. Both sides had done their research. Both sides negotiated as equals. They discussed trade agreements. The Council had developed its own trade networks over the past century, inefficient at first, but improving. They didn't need human trade routes anymore. But they wanted to connect their networks with humanity's. Not dependency, but cooperation. They discussed cultural exchanges. Young humans wanting to study alien cultures, alien students wanting to learn on Earth. not one-sided charity, but genuine mutual interest. They discussed scientific collaboration. The Council had made remarkable progress in the past century. Forced to solve their own problems, they'd developed technologies that impressed even the human delegation. They wanted to share research, learn from each other. "We've developed a new, faster-than-light drive," said a Korak scientist named Darren. "It's not as efficient as what you showed in Ambassador Tay's broadcast. But it works. We'd like to compare notes." Kai pulled up his data pad. "We'd be interested in that. Our engineers have been stuck on a problem with quantum field stability. Maybe your approach could help." It was the kind of conversation humanity had always wanted, not asking for help, not providing help, but two groups of intelligent beings sharing knowledge because both benefited. "What about military cooperation?" asked the Threx representative, a female warrior named Cress. "The pirate clans are still a problem." Kai nodded. "We've noticed. We'd be willing to coordinate patrol routes, share intelligence, but we won't do the patrols for you." "We wouldn't ask you to," Cress said firmly. "We've learned that lesson. We've built our own multi-species patrol forces. They actually work now. We just want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts or leaving gaps." That seems reasonable. As the day wore on, Kai found himself impressed. These weren't the dependent, squabbling species from the historical records. They'd grown. They'd matured. They'd learned. During a break, old Velmuth pulled Kai aside. "Walk with me." They strolled through the station's observation deck. Through the windows, Kai could see ships from dozens of species coming and going. "I was there when your predecessor, Ambassador Tay, announced humanity's departure," Velmuth said quietly. "I thought it was the end of everything. In a way, it was. But it was also a beginning. It must have been hard. Harder than you can imagine. Millions died in the wars. Billions suffered. There were times I cursed Tay's name, cursed all of humanity for abandoning us." Velmuth stopped, looking out at the stars. "But he was right. We needed to fall. We needed to fail. Because we'd forgotten how to succeed on our own. And now? Now we're stronger than we ever were under the old council. Not in ships or weapons, though we've built those too. Strong in confidence, in capability, in knowing we can solve our own problems." He turned to Kai. "We don't need you anymore, and that's exactly why we're ready to work with you." Back on Earth, Hannah Bake, now ancient and confined to a wheelchair, watched the negotiations via live feed. Around her, the next generation of scientists worked on projects that would have seemed like magic a century ago. "They're doing well," observed her assistant, a young man named June Park. "Better than well," Hannah said. "They're doing what we always hoped they would, standing as equals." "Do you think we were right? To leave them like that?" Hannah was quiet for a long time. "Millions died, June. Millions who might have lived if we'd stayed. I think about them every day. But billions more are alive now because the Council learned to save itself. Trillions will benefit over the coming centuries because the galaxy learned to stand on its own feet." She smiled sadly. It was the right choice. That doesn't make it an easy one. The negotiations continued for 3 days. When they finally concluded, both sides had agreed to a framework. Not a grand alliance like the old council. Not political union, just cooperation between sovereign entities who respected each other. "We'll start small," Ambassador Yuna said. "A joint research station here at the border. Cultural exchange programs. Coordinated trade policies. We can build from there." "Agreed," Kai said. "We're not looking to rejoin the council. And you're not looking to become dependent on us again. This is something new. Something better," Yuna added. On the final day, Velmuth asked to speak privately with Kai. They sat in a small garden built into the station. Real plants growing under artificial light. "I have a message for Ambassador Tay, if he's still alive," Velmuth said. "He is. Retired, but healthy. Tell him." Velmuth paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell him I understand now. Tell him I forgive him. Though he probably doesn't need my forgiveness. Tell him he was the best friend the council ever had, even when he left us. Kai nodded, recording the message. I'll make sure he gets it. And tell him one more thing. Velmuth's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Tell him we grew up. Finally. The shuttle journey back to Earth gave Kai time to think. He drafted his report, detailing everything that had been discussed and agreed upon. But he also added personal observations. The council we met is not the council our ancestors left, he wrote. They've been through fire and emerged stronger. They've learned to trust each other, to work together, to solve problems without outside help. They're not perfect. They still have conflicts and challenges, but they face them as competent adults, not dependent children. For the first time in a century, humanity can engage with the galactic community without fear of becoming their caretaker. We can be partners, friends, colleagues, not saviors, not servants, just equals. When the shuttle docked at Earth's orbital station, Kai was met by a small crowd. News of the successful negotiations had already spread, but he noticed one person standing apart from the crowd, an old man with white hair and deep lines around his eyes. Ambassador Taekwon. Kai approached him. I have a message from Director Velmuth. He played the recording. Tae listened in silence. And when it finished, tears rolled down his weathered face. He grew up, Tae whispered. Was it worth it? Kai asked. All the pain, all the suffering? Tae looked up at the stars, visible through the station's dome. Ask me that question 100 years from now, when the benefits of a strong, independent galactic community have had time to grow. Ask the species that will thrive, because the Council learned to stand on its own. He turned to Kai. But ask the families of those who died in the wars, and they might give you a different answer. History will judge us. I'm not sure I have the right to. What happens now? Now? Tae smiled. Now we see what the galaxy can become when every species reaches its full potential. Including us. We've grown too, you know. Being free from the burden of maintaining everyone else, let us explore what humanity could be. Over the following years, the relationship between humanity and the Council slowly deepened. The Joint Research Station became 5 stations. Trade flourished. Students from dozens of species studied on Earth, and human students ventured out to alien worlds. There were still problems. Still conflicts. Still challenges. But now, when crises arose, the Council handled them. Sometimes they asked humanity for advice. Sometimes they offered advice to humanity. Sometimes they worked together. Sometimes they worked separately. It was messy and complicated and imperfect. But it was healthy. 50 years after Kai's first mission, now an old man himself, he attended the dedication of the first truly joint human council colony, a world settled by volunteers from 30 species, including Earth. Not a human colony that aliens were allowed to live in. Not a council world that tolerated human presence. A shared world, built together, governed together. At the ceremony, he met the elderly Quellan ambassador Yuna, his old negotiating partner. They'd become good friends over the decades. Look at this, she said, gesturing at the diverse crowd. Humans and Threks and Silicates and Korax, all building something together. We could have had this a century and a half ago, Kai observed. No, Yuna said firmly. We couldn't have. Back then, we would have let humans build it and taken credit. This is different because we're different. Because we earned it. Kai thought about that. Humanity's silent exit fractured the Council, and forced us to put ourselves back together. Yuna finished. Stronger than before. That fracture was the best thing that ever happened to us. As the sun set on the new colony's first day, Kai watched families from dozens of species settling into their new homes. Children of different species playing together. Adults working side by side on common projects. It wasn't the galaxy humanity had left behind. It was better. Harder won. Bought with tears and blood and loss. But better, and somewhere, on a quiet garden on Earth, an ancient man named Taekwon watched the same sunset via live feed, and smiled. They had grown up, finally.